This show is brought to you by our patrons at patreon.com/Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
Robots Radio presents
The Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
Welcome to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, a place where the Elder Scrolls community can come together to discuss the boundaries of our knowledge about the universe of the Elder Scrolls. All right, adventurers, welcome back to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. It is time for a new episode. Last week we wrapped up the last week of February. We are into a new month of March, and we talked with our patrons. So that means we're kicking off this month with a new topic, and this one's going to be a little bit different, but I'll get into that in a minute. With me, as usual, is my co-host, Lotus of Doom. Lotus, welcome back. How's it going?
Things are well. Be very curious to dive into this one. This is a little more game lore as opposed to just story lore.
Yeah.
More my specialty, as I knew more of this than having to learn it on the fly.
Right. And this is, we talk about all sorts of things here. And as the show continues, we're of course going to continue talking about the lore and the backgrounds of the worlds and characters and all those kinds of things. But I also want to always make sure that we are giving the games a fair amount of attention. And this show will never be like only a discussion about like what the trial was we ran this week and those kinds of things, because, your other show, Tales of Tamriel, does that a lot better than I'm going to do that. And but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about the games and the way the games work and some of the details that connect the series over time. And I think that's really the perspective I want to get to today. Is we're going to go back in time. We're going to start with the most recent games and eke our way back over time to see how did these work now, and how did the other games work, and what is similar and what is different about that experience, and about learning the world and the lore and the gameplay and those kinds of things. And Lotus is a great he's one of the few people I've known to actually dig into the majority of the other games in the series, earlier than something like Morrowind and the offshoots and stuff. So this is a wonderful opportunity to have this conversation. And then later on in the episode, we've got some reviews and some patrons to thank. And then we also have some news for Elder Scrolls Online because of some cool stuff that they're doing with the champion point respec and the ability to respec your character. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. But Lotus, why don't we kick this off? When we think about Elder Scrolls today, most people either think Skyrim or Elder Scrolls Online or both. And then sometimes we go back and we visit Oblivion or Morrowind. That's usually kind of our perspective on it, right? So when it comes to something like ESO, the experience of creating your character and entering the world is fairly simplified, right? You pick a race, that's traditional. You always pick a race. You pick a gender, that's traditional. I don't think there's a game where you don't get to pick a gender, right?
No, I was going to say you always get to pick. Yep.
You always pick a gender. You always pick a race. The races are more expansive than they've been in some of the earlier titles, but we'll talk about that.
Yes. The difference you get definitely changes from game to game. Pretty drastically in some cases, as some races originally weren't even like speaking races. Right.
So we'll get to that when we get back to there. So you pick those things. In Elder Scrolls Online, you pick a faction because it's an MMO. And you align yourself with a specific faction, which is not something you do in any of the other games until you're actually playing through the games and you associate yourself with a specific group through your gameplay decisions.
Sure.
And then you also pick a class right from the beginning. And that happens in some of the other games, but again, it's different. In the sense of Elder Scrolls Online, you pick a predetermined class that gives you a specific skill line that is not available to any other class. That's basically the main difference. Right?
Correct. And it's it's actually kind of funny with how open Elder Scrolls Online is compared to some of the other ones. And, the classes themselves are much more hard set in Elder Scrolls Online, even though you can do so much to shape your character and do so many things, that's not so much how classes worked in the other games. And even amongst the other games, the classes are different. You could also starting right back from the beginning, you could make your own class. You don't really make your own. You pick a class. You're a Templar. You're a Necromancer.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the other games, all the way back to Arena, they have a predetermined set of classes that you could do. I'm, a Nightblade or a Spell Sword. And it would give you bonuses to whatever those, whatever swath of martial arts and magical arts you have at your disposal.
Your skills. So like your mainline skills or your secondary skills, depending on the game.
Right. And another thing was armor restrictions. Like, you couldn't, if you were a Nightblade, you couldn't wear heavy armor, for example, in Arena.
Which is very Dungeons and Dragons. That's where that comes from, basically.
Yep. So that's much more a thing. Whereas even though the class lines are pretty restricted, like you get these skills as a result of picking this class. It's whether you choose to use them or not is up to you, but that's one of the benefits of having this skill line and how some of your skills will work. Dragon Knights, for example, one of your passive skills, we won't go into everything, of course, but just like an example. And one thing that actually always screws with me when I play other classes, because I main a Dragon Knight, is when I use my ultimate ability, I get a portion of my health, magicka, and stamina back as a reward. Other classes don't get that. That's a unique thing to Dragon Knights. So in a situation where I'm panicked, I could just use my ultimate, even if I don't necessarily want the ultimate, just to get resources back.
Right.
Whereas if I was on a Templar, I could do exactly. Whereas if I do that on a Templar, I'm like, cool, I wasted my special or my ultimate. And it didn't help at all. So. Right.
Yeah. So in that sense, there, I believe it's 3 skill lines that are available to each class that don't show up in the other classes. So like the Templar skill lines there's 3 of them with a certain number of abilities and then an ult that you can choose from, active and passive. And those things are set for that class. You never get to touch those things unless you are that class.
Yes.
And that is completely different in Elder Scrolls Online than it is from, say, something like Skyrim or Oblivion or Arena. All of those other games.
It's kind of a wholly unique system based on a similar system. So that's something very unique to Elder Scrolls Online itself. Right. Is, your class line is very specifically these set of things, and that's what you do with them.
Right. And that's what creates a difference. And that's why you want to stick with and invest with a specific character type throughout the game. It's also why it makes sense to mix and match different classes with each other when you go into a dungeon or a trial, because you will have abilities that other people don't have, and it helps you support each other.
Very important in endgame trials. It's not necessarily make or break, but it determines like a lot. You can notice the feel if you have a good 12-person composition involving all of the different buffs from different classes. Like everybody's very, we've got 2 wardens, a dragon knight, we've got 3 necromancers. That flow becomes very apparent when you get minor and major buffs with, you start getting into the finer details, but it's like it makes a big difference on how those classes interplay with each other. And that's kind of like you had alluded to. That's the MMO aspect of it, as opposed to a single player experience.
Right. And then from the building of your character, you're thrown into the world. You get a similar kind of introduction to the world, but it depends on which expansion was out and how you go through that. And so that's a huge discussion. We'll kind of avoid that for the ESO part of this storyline, right? For the description. But then you're in the world and you're given very specific goals. There is somebody with an arrow over their head, and there's other people with arrows over their heads, and you go talk to them, and then you have a very brief conversation where you ask very specific kinds of questions based on whatever stats or character type you have, or if you've met them before or whatever. And then you know exactly where to go for the next piece of that quest most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. You either get like, oh, you need to go talk to that guy over there, and you get another arrow and you go talk to that guy. Or you get a little circle on the map that says, go find a thing. It's somewhere in this little circle. You go over and you find the thing, right? Or go fight the bad guys over here. Go to this circle, fight the bad guys, right? And it breadcrumbs you all the way through the experience. It's not about figuring out a puzzle and learning where to go and living in the world in a very realistic kind of way, where like if I ran into you on the street and you're like, hey, I have a quest. I need to find the best pizza in town. And I was like, okay, the best pizza in town is this place called, Jimmy's down the road. And you're like, okay, where exactly is Jimmy's down the road? And I'm like, it's about 2 miles that way. You got to make a left at this road and make a right at this road, but then you'll see it coming up on the right. Like you'd actually have to go find that, right? You're not going to have the GPS on your phone that takes you directly to that spot unless, live in a world with GPSs, right? But,
right. Yeah.
But
I have my magic GPS.
Your magic GPS, right? But Elder Scrolls Online, very much, it's basically like you have a magic GPS. Everywhere just tells you where to go, and you go do the thing, and then you go back to the person, you talk to them, you go to the next person, you just kind of follow the quests around, and then that kind of paints the story of the world. I also feel like you're never really in danger of the world itself harming you or setting you back in any major way.
Sort of, because there's no... In order to keep the flow of an MMO, there is no hard game over screen. You can wipe, you can need to restart something, but there's no... You're dead. It's over. And
most of the time, even if you're just wandering through the world and you come across a monster and you don't want to fight it, you just run away, and eventually it stops following you. It's chained to a certain distance to follow. Right.
It has a leashing mechanic where it can only follow you so much, but it has its area of the map.
Right.
Honestly, the gaminess of Elder Scrolls Online, although there's a lot of interactable things, and it definitely has the Elder Scrolls vibe, I would say it feels almost the most game-ish of all of the series.
Right.
But there's no way to really avoid that because of the interaction with other players and everyone having the potential to interact with the world. If you just start dragging all the monsters across Tamriel into one big pile, nobody else gets to play. It's like
right. And then you get to like kill people with this giant monster pile that just runs into them because you dragged them into them. I mean, these are the kinds of problems that we had with games back in the late 90s when MMOs first came about. Stuff like Ultima Online and what was the other one? It'll come to me later. But yeah, these were the things they figured out back then, that like people could game the system in those ways and destroy it for other players. So Elder Scrolls Online has basically, gates up to keep those things from happening that we've learned over the years, or game designers have learned over the years to implement. So it does kind of pull you out of the experience of the role-playing aspect a little bit. But at the same time, if you don't worry about that stuff, you also now don't have to worry about crazy stuff. Like the time a freaking troll chased me half the way across Skyrim because I couldn't get rid of him in Skyrim,
right?
Because it doesn't have a chain mechanic, and it just kept coming, and I couldn't get rid of the stupid troll. Like that stuff can happen in the other games. The other thing that happens in Elder Scrolls Online is that the story is doled out in a very orderly process depending on the quest line that you're going on.
Yes.
So basically you pick a quest line, you're like, I'm going to do this zone, and you go through the zone and you do the zone quest line, and you might find some other little side quests along the way. But for the most part, you're just kind of working your way through the zone.
Yes.
Whereas
it's much more of a theme park.
Yeah.
Where you have lots of options in order to do things, especially with the update. It's been years now, called One Tamriel, where you can kind of jump and explore regions as you see fit. Again, the story does its best to form around you, but there's a set story path. So you're not going to be able to, this isn't a spoiler, but like you can't save, the prince of this kingdom captured by, bandits before he was captured by the bandits. Like you can't just do it in literally any order.
Right.
You have to have the thing happen to the other thing.
Right.
But
Whereas in the other games, you could come across, say, a prince captured in a place and not know that there was even a quest to go save him yet.
Exactly. Or, little did you know there was a quest there because a dragon came by in Skyrim and nuked this person, and now that quest line is dead.
Right. Yeah, those systems don't play out the way they would in the real world. Everything's kind of waiting for you to get there, and then you get there, and the world forms around you. Yeah, for the most part, which creates a more cohesive story, but it also creates what feels like a theme park. You're going from one thing to the next, and you're kind of working your way through. So Elder Scrolls Online is kind of the odd man out in the sense of the way that stuff works because it is an MMO. Then we go back. Let's go back to the time of Skyrim. Let's think about, you start your character, you're on a cart. You're not in a menu, right?
Yes.
You're not like...
You were rolling in for a very cinematic intro that is notorious at this point, that I don't think anybody, whether you're a gamer or not, has not somehow seen this intro or a parody of this intro.
Right. So you don't go to a game screen and then tab over and look through each of the options and then enter the world. You enter the world and you make your way into the world, and you all of a sudden get a story that unfurls, and you're in a cart with some important guy who's been arrested. You make your way into a small town, and then all of a sudden things happen. And then as you get out of the cart, you get to make your character. And you decide, okay, what am I? Because you're answering questions about who are you, right?
Right.
So again, it kind of imparts that into the world. It's part of the process of the world. You have to you declare who you are, and so therefore that's who you are, which has lore implications, but we're not going to talk about that. So in this case, you have all the main races, all the genders, but you're not declaring so much a stagnant character class, right? This isn't like ESO in that sense. And while you explain this, I'm going to go turn the fan on because I forgot to. So you talk. All right.
So with Skyrim, and it was actually mentioned in chat, it's probably, I would say, the most contentious with players, where not only are there not... It doesn't have a defined class of any type. There are just, here are your skills, and you are the Dragonborn. That's how it goes down. But you are just governed by this set of skills. Everything is at your disposal. They're all kind of neutralized at the beginning. And there's something that we'll be getting into as we go back farther called governing attributes, which are not in this. Right. It's a thing that's been largely dropped from the series, but it was very long standing in the series before this. We'll get into that after. But the only attributes you have, other than your skill constellations, which again, they use the constellations. I assume it was for cohesiveness with Elder Scrolls Online and the champion point system and that. But the thing with the attributes were, and it's been in most all of the games, is you have magicka, stamina, and health.
Yep.
Again, stamina even is a thing that's changed over time, as it used to be referred to as fatigue.
Right.
And health was wounds in just Battlespire, which really confused me. But that whole concept was very, very pared down. It was, you have the potential to do whatever you want, and you craft your journey by playing. If you use your one-handed sword, your sword skill your one-handed sword skill goes up. If you are constantly using archery or sneaking around, those skills go up, which is a very unique concept to the Elder Scrolls. Not quite, that system is not how ESO works. Now, granted, you just take the skill, you put it on your bar, and the according XP goes to that skill. So that's different already from one game to the next.
Right.
And Skyrim's kind of an outlier in of itself, but it has this system where the more you do a thing, the better you get at that thing. And those individual level ups in those skill lines contribute to your overall level. And that's how it goes.
And
You level
everything
up,
contributes
you
to
pick
your
an
overall
attribute.
level. There's no skill that's more important than any other skill. And
It's just skills.
and you aren't called a specific class of anything. Even if you're just really good at sneaking and pickpocketing and killing people at a distance, you're not called an assassin or a thief. Those are just the abilities that you've used the most, so those are the ones you're best at.
You're just a sneaky dragonborn instead of a loud dragonborn.
Right. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about how that works in some of the other ones, because I feel like this is a good place to move into the story side of this. Or did you have something else you wanted to bring up?
Well, the only thing that is interesting about this one, and we'll be able to hopefully explain a little more why. Mm-hmm. This system actually got a decent amount of backlash, but also I feel was the reason that so many new people were onboarded to the series. It's either referred to as streamlined to some or dumbed down to others, because it's much less confusing than the old systems were. Mm-hmm. So Skyrim, I mean, it's the best-selling Elder Scrolls game. It onboarded a lot of new people to the series, and when people go back to the other ones, it can be jarring, to say the least, because they're like, what are all of these things? So it's an interesting change they made in how the leveling system and class system existed / worked. Right.
Yeah, it was simplified from the others. Basically, you do things, you get points, those things get better, you get enough points, you level up also. It all just kind of connected that way.
Yep.
And the world and the stories come about naturally as you walk around the world. You stumble upon, like, you get basically after you get through the intro of the game, you have, hey, you should go talk to so-and-so in this town, and that takes you into the main quest line. But you can completely avoid that. You can just go live in the world and do whatever you want and come across whatever emergent story quest lines, whatever, come about. There's no guiding you necessarily to a specific place. Like if you started playing Skyrim, you're like, and you hadn't heard anything about the game before, other than there's a really cool Thieves Guild quest you got to go do. You wouldn't be able to even know where to go. You would have to just kind of discover it. Right? There's not like you can choose, I want to go to the Thieves Guild, or you go to the next town and you go, where's the Thieves Guild in this town? Oh, it's over there. I'm going to go do this quest line. You have to kind of come across it in the world in order to open it up. And I feel like that's a more natural progression. And it also pulls from the other games, right? Like the other games are all very much built in this sort of, or most of them, in the sort of like you do things in the world, and then that uncovers other things to do in the world. And so your story becomes your journey through that as you go from one thing to the next.
Right.
So you are, in this case, very much more in control of your own journey, but you're not completely in control, because there are NPCs that you can't necessarily kill. So you could come across, like we were saying, the prince in the castle and save him before you even knew there was a quest. And then you find out, oh, the prince says, I should get back to my hometown. I bet so-and-so's worried for me. And then you get back there and you get rewarded for saving him, even though you didn't know it was a quest line, right?
Right.
But I don't remember what my other point was. I just lost it.
Where I was going to say, was it referring to the fact that won't happen in like something like Elder Scrolls Online?
That won't happen in Elder Scrolls Online. That becomes your story, right? Like, so when you and I are talking about our experience of Skyrim, I'm going, yeah, like when I stumbled across that prince that I saved, and you were like, oh, you mean the quest line from this place where this other thing was happening, and that's why I got captured? And I'm like, wait, what? And you're like, no, that's how I knew I needed to go save him. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I just came across him and brought him back and got a reward. And we both have very different stories, personal stories about the way the world unfolded for us.
It's a very small thing, but it's probably the easiest one that the majority can relate to, because it's literally from the first barrow of the game and the first town you go to, is if you get the stone tablet, and if you hit the barrow on the way and you get this stone tablet, and when you talk to the mage in Whiterun, if you're already holding the tablet, he'll be like, "Oh, great! Like, where'd you get that? Great!" And he'll just go right into the dialogue about it. Whereas if you did not explore the barrow, you won't have that, obviously.
Mhm.
So he'll give you the quest to go get it. Like, it's the end point is the same, but how you get there has multiple ways of, like, I just happen to stumble across this, so it can make your journey more unique.
Yes. And that's in Kung Fu Kangaroo in chat says that's put into words why I enjoy single player TES games so much. And Fallout is a lot like this too. The world, the games, the role playing games that Bethesda makes allow you to chart your own course through the world, and the world responds to your decisions. And that's not just in conversations. It's the way the things unfurl in the world. And sure, the world isn't really happening beyond where you are, but parts of it still are. So, for example, if somebody puts a bounty out on your head, there's a chance that somebody's going to try to fulfill that bounty. That person, if you avoid them and go somewhere else, is still out there trying to figure out how to get to you, right? There are events in the world that are still happening on the other side of the map that the game knows are happening that you aren't necessarily seeing right in that moment. But not everything works that way. It kind of waits for you to put those things into motion. It's almost like, imagine a variety of different like tracks of dominoes, right? And until you walk in the room, none of the dominoes are necessarily moving. But if you move this line and then you go a little further and hit that other line, eventually the two might cross further up. But they went on these paths where you didn't see them before they came back around potentially.
Right.
Maybe that's kind of an analogy. And that's still not a perfect analogy, but that's kind of the idea here. And the game plays through the stories. And in fact, there are lots of people who never did finish the main quest line because they're having too much fun doing all the other stuff and just living in the world, and that's what makes games like this magical. Now let's go back to Oblivion. We go back another step, right? We have a game where I believe you define your character in the menus.
That is correct. So you kind of have like this old parchment book, and this is where, again, there are classes. Right. Now, there are a bunch of predetermined classes, or you can make your own, which I, for better or worse, usually am like, you know what? I will make my own class.
Yes, I usually do it too.
Yeah. I've strayed away from that a little bit in some of the older games that I've been playing, because as the farther back you go, it is a lot of different systems. So in Oblivion, what you choose as a class is still skill based, like with Skyrim, and you can do whatever. You can be a jack of all trades still. However, you get bonuses based on your class or the things you call your major skills or minor skills.
Right.
And in Oblivion, you don't just level up from anything. You level up when you upgrade a major skill, and you get so the real thing, which again, I'm a little min-maxy, so it gets a bit much. Juggling when to level in Oblivion becomes a thing, because there's also, this is where there are other attributes. There's willpower, intelligence, strength, luck. This is a thing, this is, in reverse order. The first time we're seeing this. So
right, these got filtered out by the time it got to Skyrim.
They did, and this is hence where things are less dumbed down, quote unquote. There, and Oblivion is still considered dumbed down compared to Morrowind, and it keeps getting each one as it gets streamlined. People either like the streamlining or they don't. And with Oblivion came the situation of when you level up skills, you get bonuses based on the governing attribute of the skill. So if you're doing a lot of magic in a specific school, it's like, okay, well, I can increase my willpower because I got this many. And for the sake of accuracy, I just opened it up. So in order to raise attributes, when this is from the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages and all our friends over there, when you level up, you get to raise the values of 3 attributes per level. You can only pick 3. The amount you can raise an attribute depends on how many skill points you have gained in the skills governed by that attribute, major or minor, before gaining the 10th increase to a major skill, which at that point triggers your level up.
Right.
So
oh man,
this gets much more convoluted as things go back. So what I would always do, because I'm not a role player. I am how can I be an unstoppable god to rule this world? And that's always my goal. So I would always intentionally not level a major skill. And until I had reached 10 levels of a minor or a just base skill, like no major, no minor bonus. And when you have leveled a skill 10 times, you get a +5 bonus to your governing attribute. So I would put something like, oh, I'm going to earn 10 levels in alchemy at this station. So I'm just going to jam flowers in my face until I've leveled up alchemy 10 times.
Right.
And I would do that for 3 different things. Then I would allow myself to go on so that when I would level, I could add +5 to 3 different attributes. That gets real mathy, real grid-like. It's very gamey. Yeah. And a lot of people don't like that. Or
because it feels like if you're not doing it, you're missing out on something. But if you are doing it, you're grinding weird stuff and it breaks the role play.
Exactly. But some people, like Kung Fu actually mentioned from chat, the idea of, well, if I'm, say I'm a sneaky archer, well, it doesn't matter that I am garbage with heavy armor and blacksmithing. Like that doesn't fit a role play for that. And or it wouldn't in just the broad terms of things. It could if that's your story or whatever. So it allowed for a deeper role play, but also was much more convoluted to the general experience. Also, you had to sleep to level up.
Yes. You could have like 3 levels pending, and you don't get them until you sleep. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally. That was totally a thing. I enjoyed that aspect of it because it made it feel like you had to be on some sort of like.
I thought that was kind of neat too. I like the sleeping aspect. I would be fine with them bringing that back.
I think that was really cool. The other thing about, and talking about like the other side of this, in both Skyrim and Oblivion, you would get a quest. They've worked similarly. You'd go talk to somebody, you'd find out something, you'd get a quest, and then you would get a little arrow that said, go over here on the map. You'd also see it on your compass, and then you'd find your way over there. And then once you opened up locations, you could fast travel across the map to them. So those 2 things were consistent between those 2. Now let's take another step back further to Morrowind. Morrowind, you build your character in a menu, right?
Yes.
And
you have your governing attributes yet again.
Yep. Governing attributes. You pick your race. The races are all the same still.
Yep.
I believe.
We're still going with that. However, there are some other nuances here. Mainly things like, so again, the system for now is still use a thing and you get better at the thing. Well, now these categories of skills have split much, much more. There are more of them.
Yeah.
There is and each game kind of has condensed them down. This one, there was medium armor again. Medium armor wasn't a thing we saw in Oblivion or Skyrim.
Nope, just light and heavy. That was it.
Right. Spears are now a thing in Morrowind, which have long been requested to come back, and we have not seen the spear skill line.
Yeah, for ESO specifically.
Yes, for ESO specifically. Yeah. And people love spears. They look cool. So, people want spears.
And it makes sense. Historically, spears were probably the most prominently used weapon throughout most of history.
Right.
Or some form of spear rather than a sword or an axe or something like that.
The other one that we actually hadn't specifically called out, because we're not going to this is obviously an overview. If we were to dive into every nitty gritty thing, this would be a 9-hour episode.
Yeah, no, this is just kind of an overview. So just the most important bits.
one of the things, and these are Oblivion as well. These are kind of the joke things where in Skyrim, you can just, a lot of things are referenced as Skyrimming up a mountain, where you would just bunny hop your way up the terrain and it would look ridiculous, but you could just you just get enough of a pixel you can land on. Mm-hmm. Well, in Oblivion and Morrowind, there were acrobatic skills and athletic skills. Mm-hmm. You literally got levels by walking places
or jumping. You could just keep jumping everywhere you went and just level yourself up.
And that was what I used to, again, because that was how I would just walk and jump everywhere. And that because I was just getting better at jumping, and it would literally make your jump better. You could jump farther, you could jump higher, you could walk faster. So there were these. Now, the other major difference here is the shift in combat. Yes. Everything was a dice roll in Morrowind.
And again, this goes back to those Dungeons and Dragons roots of everything's a dice roll. It's not you hit it and you just do tiny baby damage until you kill it.
That was the thing.
Right.
It's the games most people are experienced with are, well, the better you are at a skill, the more damage it does within a range.
Right. But of course, if something's in front of you and it's not moving, you can hit it. Right.
Right.
But that's not how it works.
Morrowind, the joke is that why can't I hit this thing that's directly in front of me?
Right.
Because you would swing and it would roll whether you had a chance to hit or not.
Uh-huh.
And you would potentially miss even if it wasn't doing anything.
Right.
So, but then when you would hit, it would also roll a range of damage. So you could just perpetually be missing these creatures. And that was why the game was originally referred to as very difficult, because you'd miss a rat because you were completely inept at, swinging your sword. So it was just, you'd miss and miss and miss. And then the rat would bite you a couple times and you have no health or durability. So you die to the rat or the scrib or whatever the situation.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
So this is the point where I always considered, as much as Morrowind is my favorite game and I love Morrowind, this is the biggest holdup for most people. Mm-hmm. Is the combat is noticeably aged.
Right. And it makes sense because this comes from a time where you would be looking down at a game board and you'd have a character and another character and they'd get close enough to attack each other and you would roll to see if they attacked. And in your mind, you're role playing out, okay, this character swings, but this character dodged out of the way or blocked it with the shield. And that's why no damage happened. But in a game like Morrowind, they didn't have the technology to do that yet. In Skyrim, you swing at a character, it might put its shield up and negate or remove all of the damage altogether. But at least you know why it happened because they blocked your attack, right? You cast a spell at somebody and they put up one of those, magic shields, and that makes them not take damage. Well, you have a visual understanding of why it happened. Oh, that
exactly.
Whereas in something like Morrowind or earlier, it was a dice roll and there was no visual component to that. So you didn't understand, why do I keep missing? It's just standing in front of me. I remember that being so strange to me, 15 years ago or whenever I tried, 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah. And there's actually a mod I was told about where I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's a Morrowind mod. Basically, it's 100% chance to hit. Uh-huh. And they changed the system to just a damage scale thing, like some of the newer games, just to make it more user-friendly. If you see the thing and you hit the thing, it hits, and your skills were changed from the ability to hit or just miss in order to be okay, you hit it, but you suck, so you only do a little bit of damage or something like that. Or
zero damage because you're just bad at using your knife.
Yeah, because you don't know how to knife properly.
You don't know where the pointy end of your knife is, so try again.
Yeah, you're hitting them with the handle and cutting your own hand.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So the world works differently too. In Skyrim and Oblivion, you get the little dot on the map. You also have completely fleshed out, and Elder Scrolls Online is this way too, conversations. So you talk to somebody and you hear their voice and they respond to you with a voice. Everything's voice acted. Morrowind didn't have that. And not only did they not have that, but they had pages of conversations with highlighted text that you could click on if you wanted to find out more about that thing, like that place, that character, that item. Yep. You would click on it and it would open up the conversation in another direction. And you would have another 3 paragraphs of text to read with other highlighted things.
The thing was, you kind of knew if you were on the main quest path if things were voice acted,
right?
because
there
that's
were
what they could
some
afford.
Of it. Right. Like
right.
There's a little bit in there, and it was only on the main list. Plus the amount of storage space at the time.
Yes.
So
valid.
Yeah, these things, like, it wasn't a digital download where you could just download 50 gigs of a thing with a whole bunch of video and audio qualities. Yeah, it was all on a disc, and that's you didn't want to have to keep swapping discs out, so they tried to make it a certain size. Plus, it needed to work on consoles because Morrowind was released for consoles.
It was first console one. That was where I got introduced to it. Was on my friend's Xbox.
Yep.
Original Xbox.
Yep. Now, on top of all of this, remind me, because I'm trying to remember back to this. It didn't always even give you a location on the map. It would just tell you, oh, it's in the town of Balmora. In
fact, it rarely gave you a location for anything.
Right. So you had to go.
It did not have waypoint markers.
Right. So you walk into this foreign world, which looks insanely foreign, crazy. These weird looking, very strangely designed 3D, 3-dimensional characters, because they were not 2D sprites, which eventually we'll get to. But very low poly, strange looking characters with mushrooms and weird fauna and strange looking world. And now they're telling you, oh, it's over in the city that they're familiar with, but you don't know where that city is. You have no idea how far away that city is. And now you just have to go find it.
Right. And you have this journal, which your character is very poor at keeping notes, because you make notations in this journal and your character writes them in a way that's almost like him literally writing a journal. It's not like a quest log. It's like, I was told to go find, whoever, wherever.
Right.
And
Kung Fu's got a great quote here. We should read it.
Oh, what?
He says, find these mushrooms for me. They're located at the bog southeast of town. Take the road south, cross the bridge, turn left at Fort Frostmouth, and look for the rock mostly covered with moss. Once you find that good, you're halfway there.
Yes.
That's very much, yes.
Right. And exactly that. Now, remember all of that and go do this.
Right.
It's like, okay, that's, it's very immersive.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what would happen if you were living in that world. Yeah.
Was they didn't, I don't know if this was intentional. Some of the directions were just straight up wrong because people, I assumed, remembered them incorrectly or something. It would be like, oh, take a left. And they actually said, take a right. Like that, it was to the right. It wasn't to the left. So it was like, is that a typo or was that flavor for the game? Was this person just confused? It's very interesting that nothing in Morrowind is straightforward. Honestly, because of the lack of quest markers and everything like that. It was alien through and through to learn that game.
Which I think is why it's a favorite for so many people, because once you figure it out, the amount of effort you put into it gets rewarded because you learn the stories, you learn the characters, you learn the world because you have to find everything in it. So eventually you know the layout of the city like the back of your hand. You know who these characters are and why they're upset with these other characters because you actually had to read the text in order to figure it out.
The other thing, which Morrowind is also kind of, I guess, since we're going in reverse order, the first one that we encounter, you don't just have free fast travel in this game.
Right.
There are silt striders, which are these giant bugs with their shells kind of hollowed out on the top, and you can ride from major city. Basically, as long as they have a silt strider dock, they can carry you from one place to another for a fee. Kind of like the carriages in Skyrim, except you can also just teleport wherever you want once you find it. Oblivion, you didn't even need to find the major cities. You could just teleport there at the start, which was weird. Morrowind, it was go to a place and then you can teleport to this other place for a fee. Or there was a spell called Mark and Recall, where you could mark a location. You also needed to have the skill to be able to do this, so it wasn't just like a free gimme. You could mark a location, and then whenever you would want, you could recall, and it would teleport you back. So I would always mark somewhere back in town, and when I would have my shins broken because of the amount of weight that I had, stolen from a Dwemer ruin or whatever, I would just recall back to the city, sell all my garbage, and then walk back all the way so that I could pick up more trash. And it's interesting because it made you learn the landscape so much more.
Right. You felt more like you were living in the world. You had to go from one place to another. And if you were going to invest the time to do it, then you were going to make it worth your while. And if you were to invest the money on traveling from one place to another instead of walking it, then, you're going to make it worth your while. Just like in the real world, you're not just going to travel for no reason. So the other thing about this, now remind me, almost all characters are killable?
In Morrowind, all characters are technically killable, because the day I retired from my Morrowind save was the day I punched Vivek to death just to see if I could. And nobody's really more canon than Vivek. So when that was complete, I was like, well, I've done it. I've won.
Yeah.
You can ruin the story, completely ruin it. The game becomes uncompletable by killing these people, or if they die unintentionally, because again, it's sandboxy. But what it does is it will give you a message down in the corner where it's basically, you have broken the prophecy of the Nerevarine and plunged the world into eternal darkness. If you would like to actually complete the storyline, please load your save.
Right. Which is still kind of cryptic if you aren't paying attention. I've broken a prophecy? What does this mean?
Yeah. But I love that. I absolutely love that. That makes me... You can, characters die left and right in these games, and it's fine. But they always make it so that if the guy's a main quest giver, he got downed. He's knocked out.
Right.
Morrowind, that was not the case. Morrowind, it's like, they're dead. Your story's over. Everything's ruined. Great job, hero.
Yeah. So when you actually accomplish these things and fulfill the prophecy, it was an accomplishment. The things worked out in the world, and they may not have.
Yes.
It was a big deal, and it was a much harder grind to get there. Whereas something like Skyrim often feels like you just kind of fall through the world and you kind of just get better as you go, and eventually you're very powerful. And if you just play, you get better at it.
Yes.
Right? Whereas like Morrowind isn't necessarily the case. You could even spec your character in a weird direction where it makes it very difficult at the end of the game. Or completely spec it in a way where you're able to just use potions and magic spells and become like a god and destroy everything.
Yes. And again, this is another thing where like we kind of have to restrict a little bit of what we're talking about. I mean, I'm almost wondering if we should do like a
part two.
Since we've been doing such if we should do a part 2 where we can get into the finer details of this is the difference in lockpicking in games. This is the difference in spell crafting in games, because it's changed so much. Spells have literally been written into the lore because of basically exploits or loading things where levitation is outlawed. There's the Anti-Levitation Act in in other games. And in Morrowind, you could just fly around once you knew how to do it. And spell crafting was just completely off the rails powerful. And it allowed you, when you were clever, you can always find things the developers have not accounted for.
Oh, sure.
And
because the game was so open.
Exactly. So it's like the possibilities in these games is nearly endless.
Right.
And they always try to fix something like a well-known exploit from one game, but does it open the door to a totally different one? So like this is, again, it's such overview, but there's so many like nuance differences between them as well. So
yeah. Well, tell you what, we've gone almost an hour on this, and we have a bunch of games to still talk about. So why don't we wrap this up for this episode? Because you're right, there's a ton, and there's a lot of really cool stuff to talk about too. And I particularly want to pick your brain about some of the earlier games that I watched some of, but I haven't actually experienced by playing myself. And those differences, because from what I know, the origins and the spiritual beginnings of the game get carried forward in interesting ways in the other games.
Very much so, that I've learned
but they're
myself.
Still very different, right? Like there are differences and changes.
But yeah, I was going to say, just as like a teaser for next time, because I agree, there's so much more to talk about. That I kind of knew there was a lot, but now that we're going into it and we're doing such a surface level of it, it's like, oh my God, there's even more than I realized. It's like interesting changes. Like that. I mean, again, we're trying to tackle the interesting differences, but it's like we're almost to the point that you don't level up the same way anymore in the older games, where it's just straight experience points and stuff like that. It's like even basic stuff like that will eventually change as we keep going farther back.
Right. So, all right, cool. Well, we'll hold on to that for next time. We'll get into some of that stuff, and then maybe some of the nuanced differences between like magic or lockpicking, or dual wielding being a thing or not a thing. Like, yes, that could be a thing too. So, all right, cool. This has been an awesome discussion. Let's move on, because we have some patrons to thank and some other news to talk about.
The skies are marked with numberless sparks, each a fire, and every one a sign. So
we just got to talk with our patrons last week, and it's always such a great fun time. And it's my chance now that the month is wrapped up, to thank everybody specifically who signed up as new patrons last month. So I'm just going to go through the list. Alkaline 1634, Buddy Destiny, that's a good name, George L, Stephen R, David P, Siberia, and that's it. Those are our new patrons from last month. Thank you for signing up and helping to support the show. You guys are absolutely amazing and help me get through life. Basically, what am I even trying to say? You help me do this as a full-time thing and continue growing it and making it an effort and doing other kinds of content creation and putting, videos out there. I've been doing more videos online, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and streaming more often, which I'm doing now. All of that stuff is because of you guys supporting these projects and allowing me to do so. So thank you very much for that. And thank you especially to our Tier 4 and higher patrons, who I call out, or when I remember to try to call out every week. That includes Stephen R, Siberia, Kung Fu Kangaroo, Daniel O, Brad S, and Noodle Al Dente. Actually, no, I'm supposed to only call out Tier 5 and up. So Noodle Al Dente, but the rest of you, thank you. Those are our patrons who join us at the end of every month, because they're Tier 4 patrons. I am all confused today. But if you want to join us next month, sign up as a Tier 4 or higher patron, and you can come join us. Anybody who signs up at Tier 1 or higher gets early episodes, ad-free episodes, a bunch of other stuff. And one of these days, maybe we'll get to a point where we're consistently above $500 a month, and I'll get a cool Elder Scrolls tattoo to commemorate it. The Lorecast getting to that point. That would be amazing. That's kind of a stretch goal I've been wanting to get to. So I really appreciate your help. And if you can't do that, then you can leave a review. That's free, or just tell your friends. I also, because this is the first episode of the month, get to read out some of the new reviews that came in, including, we've got 3 new ones. We have this one from Jordan in Canada. It says, "The Bomb," 5 stars. "Thank you, Tom, for hosting my 2 favorite podcasts. My last 2 shifts out in the oil field, I've been taking care of the dining room alone almost every day." I love hearing these things from people who have really long jobs where they have the opportunity to listen to podcasts and how I help them get through their day. From mopping the floors, bagging fruits and veggies, doing the dishes, to almost every other thing a kitchen helper would do, I'm happy that I always have Fallout and Elder Scrolls Lorecast to make my day more bearable. Thank you for shedding light on 2 of my favorite game universes. Thank you, Tom, from Jordan. Jordan, be safe out there on the oil fields, and yes. I'm glad that we can make your work experience better. Thank you so much for taking the time to write that out. It really does mean a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then we have one from RB10494 from Great Britain. I love getting international ones too. Not to mention Canada is international, but that's like America's hat. So it's kind of closer. This one says, "A bright light in lockdown. Just picked this podcast up and listening from the very start and absolutely loving it. Currently on the Daedric Princess, so I have a lot of material to get through. Insightful and entertaining. It really is getting me through lockdown at the moment. Not played ESO for a few years, but I'm going to reinstall and give it give it a blast. Keep up the good work. It already knows he's going to have a fun time. Or they. So thank you, RB. Appreciate that. I hope Elder Scrolls Online has been awesome for you. And also feel free to come by the Discord and jump in one of the guilds, PC, Xbox, PS4. You're welcome to come play with us.
Lots of new stuff coming too. It's a good time to jump back in and test it out.
Yeah. And then one more from Glob H in the United States, who writes, a new listener. Love this pod so far. Always been obsessed with TES. Just getting back into ESO after a 3-year break. I've been binging all the pods. Great work. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Glob. All right. So thank you to everybody for taking the time to do this stuff. And thanks for just listening to the show and being here with us. All right, let's move on. Here we go.
Yes, you're entirely brilliant. Conquering madness and all that. Blah, 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 blah.
So we've got some news. There's some cool news coming for ESO very, very soon. And I did a video on this. This is one of the things that I've been doing more videos on, are when we get regular updates for news, or we have Crown Store updates, those kinds of things. I've been putting them on the Robots Radio YouTube channel. And a lot of you guys are tuning into those. They're getting a lot of views. But if you haven't already, check those out. And you want, a concise explanation of the news without having to read it yourself or whatever, I'm doing this for you guys to be able to check that stuff out and kind of give my own take on these things as well. Let's get into this. So we know that the respecs are coming, right? The changes to the CP leveling stuff, all of that stuff's
quite
coming.
an overhaul.
It's quite an overhaul. So get this. Because you're going to have to change the way your characters work, they're going to give us some conveniences, let's say, and a reward. So the reward is you get a free pet, which is great. It's a cute little, it's a cute little, what is it called? Amber Sheen Veil Fawn. It's like this little deer with these really cool colorings and like stripes and spots on it. Really cool little guy, which is nice. I mean, that's kind of a nice little bonus. But the big news is that starting on March 8th for PC and March 16th for consoles, you will have 2 weeks of unlimited free respecs at the rededication shrine. So you just need to get to a shrine and you can reset your attributes, your skills, and their morphs, and your championship points as much as you want. And this is huge because the new championship point system is going to completely change the meta. Like these builds are good, these builds aren't good, whatever. And we're going to go through a time where we're all really just figuring this out again, right?
Yes. And from somebody who does not play a swath of different characters, I waste a lot of money on respecs, depending upon what I'm doing. So I'm a fan of this because when I go from PvP to PvE with what I'm playing, I need to shift some stuff around. Normally, I play a tank for everything. Sometimes I need to shift skills if I'm going to do something for an extended period. It's like, okay, well, I need to do this as a damage dealer instead. So it's like, well, I need to switch this and this and this. And the more you do it, the more
it's a little bit of a long day.
A bit. The more you do it, the cost does go up.
Oh yeah.
And I've been playing for, I don't know, whenever it hit console religiously, and I played it a little bit before that, but that wasn't my character. So I've consistently played since it hit console, and it is not cheap to do that anymore for me. So I appreciate being able to jump around, mess around, and with some of the changes, maybe I'm going to change some of the things I use just in general because they work differently with the new champion system. So I don't know yet. I've been largely letting people mess around on the PTS, test things out. But once it hits live, I'll be much more curious to dig my hands in and see what's changed and what's kind of the new way that I want to play this.
Yeah, I think that, I've been waiting to respec my character, and this is awesome because I'm going to get lots of opportunity to play with different setups and things. And I don't know, like my main, I play lots of other secondary characters, but my main is a Nightblade. And I recently, over the last year, switched from a stamina build to a magicka build. I don't know how, at first I felt really good about it. And then some other changes happened and I was like, this isn't as good as I thought. And I went all full on vampire. might want to mix that up a little bit differently. So yeah, I'm going to be checking this out as well. So, I'm excited. I think that this is absolutely an awesome way to do this, to bring everyone back, but then also allow them to just keep messing with their skills and champion points until they feel comfortable with it for 2 weeks is a great way to do that. It's also going to speed up the discovery of what works and what doesn't.
That's also very true.
So anyway, great stuff coming for ESO. If you're confused about any of the championship stuff, there's lots of videos about how the points are going to work. They had a big reveal back in January about that as well. There's a lot of information out there for you guys. Plus, you could just come and talk on our Discord. There are definitely some people in our Discord that are, super in the know when it comes to what's going on with building a character and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of people who can help you out.
Also, so it's all there at the moment, but because it's currently on the PTS, things have already changed several times over the testing weeks. So you don't need to understand everything yet, because by the time it hits live, it might be different. It's already been different a couple different times. So, things keep changing until they go live. So don't get discouraged if it's like, this is too much, I don't understand it. It's like, well, nobody really does yet. It's in flux. Varying degree. Yeah, it is. It's very much in flux.
Yeah. And that's a normal thing. Anytime they put one of these big updates out, they put it out on the PTS for that reason, for people to try it out. And then they help uncover, hey, this needs to be adjusted, or this thing works and this thing doesn't, that kind of stuff. So, so don't take anything as gospel until this is out there. And then even after this is out there, people are still going to rediscover new ways of doing builds and things like that. So, just roll with it, lay out your character. You've got 2 weeks to try new stuff out. If you don't like the way you do a build, change it up, see what you think. Lots of time. A week after this has been out there, that all the major designers out there of the different kinds of builds, guys like Allcast and everyone else out there who does that, will have multiple new build types out for you to try out as well. So
exactly,
that's also going to be available for you to test as well. So that's what we got coming. Other than that, my other big announcement is that I am now that the Mechanist thing is revealed, and for those of you who aren't in the know about this, the Mechanist from the Fallout games is a character that I have been role-playing on the internet, on Twitter and in videos and streams for a while, challenging some of the Fallout community to rap battles, which is ridiculous because I didn't even know I could rap until I jokingly challenged somebody, and then they came back at me, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll give it a try. So that's been a thing lately. And so a lot of my time has been focused on that. But now that that's out, I am rededicating my time to making sure that I can stream in the afternoons. I've been doing this all this week, starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, which is like noon 30 Pacific. And I've been playing games with my son. We've been playing Sea of Thieves, but I'm going to be playing some other games as well. Lots of people have been coming by, hanging out with us. It's been super fun. A lot of working and lurking. It's also very much a kids safe stream for kids who are like finishing up their school day and want to watch. If you have kids who want to watch me and my son, who's 10, play games together, completely work safe, completely child friendly, still a good time. So come hang out with us. This is my attempt at being more involved with the community and chatting with you guys more often, kind of like my work streams were, but it's now in the afternoons. Also, I've been doing more streams in the evenings too. So that's been fun. Also, I talked a little bit with the community about this earlier today during our stream, but I might set up a regular Friday night Lorecasters Guild event night so that we can get together around 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific every Friday night on PC, because that's the platform I can play on, and get together and just do some events together, or go, raid a dungeon, depending on how many people we have. Maybe we'll try out a trial. Who knows? It could get crazy. Who knows? Maybe we'll just kill all the world bosses in Morrowind for a while. We'll figure it out. But if you want to be involved in that, jump in the Discord. Let me know if you're interested, and we can get a group of us started on kind of a regular weekly thing. And I think it would be a lot of fun, and it would give me a reason to definitely jump back in the game every week. So let's talk about setting that up. Lotus, what do you have going on?
Well, I was going to say I streamed last weekend. I was hoping to stream before we actually recorded tonight, but real life circumstances prevented that from happening. So, but yeah, for anybody who's interested, much to the polar opposite end of the spectrum, where Tom does things that are family friendly and good to watch around your children, I do my own streams, which are largely me just doing things that grief me for the entertainment of others.
Saying the F-bomb over and over and over again.
Yes, and to many of the people who like to joke about it in chat, my inner Bostonian comes out when I speak on stream. So, yeah, if that stuff does not offend you, I mean, it's never meant to make anybody feel awkward or anything like that, but it's not the censored version that I do for the podcasts, where it's just, that's how I normally speak. But, yeah, I generally do stuff like play the old games, and I do it without any concept of looking stuff up. So it's all blind playthroughs, which occasionally is concerning because I don't know what I'm doing. And sometimes they really, I would say that I'm always concerned about dead air, but it's never really the situation because I just die so much playing these games. I always have something that I'm doing, even if it's replaying the same thing that I failed at like 40 times in a row or whatever. But yeah, it's if you have any interest in, well, I mean, I play a lot of ESO, but yeah, if you have any interest in the classics, I've been streaming that pretty consistently, and I save the VODs and put them in collections for people, since that's almost more of a historical documentary from a person who doesn't know what they're doing.
You know what I should do sometime, if ever I get the extra time, is download all of those and cut out every time you drop an F-bomb and do some sort of like 3-hour compilation of just you going like, ugh, F, just.
Yeah.
Just over and over and over again.
There's even the clips that people kindly take of me when I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing have been legendary. So it's a good time over there. I don't really have a stream schedule. It's really just when I can get the time to, but I do have a lot of fun with it, and I'm glad people enjoy it. Whether it's just an educational thing on how to not play the old games, what the old games are like, or to ask me actual like questions about them or whatever.
Awesome. Awesome.
But yeah, other than that, we've got our other show that I'm part of each week that I've been trying to mention back to back on both of these shows for a little synergy of Tales of Tamriel, which is just kind of a more roundtable discussion of our tales from in the game and the news. So it's a little more open-ended, but it's also much, much longer as we tend to be a little rambly.
It's more conversational. It's more just hey, this is what I've done this week, and this is what I think about it.
Yeah, and we usually make a discussion topic that when you've got 3 or 4 guests, we actually had Pylon from the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages join us last week for his little... Apparently it's an annual thing now. It started after PAX East last year, and we've just unintentionally done it. So we're like, oh, well, that just makes us sad that PAX isn't a thing anymore, but it was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I was going to say, you'll just see me floating around the community. Feel free to shoot me a message at Twitter or Discord if you ever need anything from me. And if I can help you, I'll be happy to.
Awesome stuff. Well, guys, that's it for this week. Stay safe out there. And if you get the bug, jump into one of those older games and give it a try. And you can maybe understand a little bit more about what we're going to be discussing next week as we continue the topic. Thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, chat. Chat, we will be rolling directly into the Dungeons and Dragons Lorecast. So if you like Dungeons and Dragons, or you want to have a sense of how those games work and maybe even connect into Elder Scrolls from a gameplay or lore perspective, then stay tuned. Stay here and chat. I'm going to put up some of the rap battles I mentioned from the Mechanist to fill the next 10 minutes until we get the other show launched. And I'll be back in just 10 minutes. All right. Lotus, thanks for joining me. See you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. If you have something you'd like to contribute to the show, please reach out to us at elderscrollslorecast@gmail.com or on Twitter @ESO Lorecast. I really appreciate you listening, and I'd love to hear from you soon.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Spark shows for interesting people. Check check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.